Well, today it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Marchell Abrahams. Welcome, Marchell,
Thank you.
and thank you for giving us your time. Now, you're one of the early supporters of the Britain's Hidden History movement.
Yes,
We actually met at Ross's funeral,
I remember.
and that was a beautiful tribute you gave, and it was on such an emotional occasion.
It was. I was enormously honoured to be asked by Angie to do that. I have to say that my contribution to the tribute itself was pretty minimal because it was Ross's cousin, um, Neil Broadstock, who actually provided the meat of it, so to speak. And it was my pleasure to read his wonderful words. Like all Welshmen, he seems to be a natural poet. So that was how that came about. But yes, it was an enormous honour to be asked to give it. And wasn't it a packed day, despite the dreadful weather?
I was in the other church. It was two of them were packed.
Mm,
Well done for that. You did marvelous there.
thank you.
So
So did
before we,
the other two, by the way. So
yeah,
the
they
other two,
did.
it
They
was
did.
yeah, it was very special to be there.
It was indeed. So before we start, then, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Um, I could. I'm not quite sure what there is very interesting to say. Um, I've always been fascinated by words. The English language has always been my thing. I used to be laughed at school because I read dictionaries for fun, and it's I'm a soldier's daughter and a soldier's widow, so I have a natural affinity with the army mind, if you like. My mother was in the Wrens during the war, and I'm not particularly, I didn't go to university or anything like that, which I minded a lot because my father came from one of those formidably intelligent Scots families. And it was just as well I didn't go to university because I would not have made the grade at all. But I'm lucky actually that I didn't go because I seem to have turned the other way round. And instead of um, climbing up the greasy pole with the rest of the academics, I'm now a deep sea diver. And this is a very much less a less occupied field, academically speaking. And so, yes, do I have to say anything else?
No, that's
I
great.
don't
I
know.
find you very interesting.
Oh, thank you. Half Scots, half English, lots of Welsh, and an Irish grandmother. So I think
Um,
that qualifies me as British.
and with maybe an Israeli or two tribes of Judah surname.
Oh no, no, it's a farming family from Shropshire. It might have been Hebrew in origin, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a tremendous connection between the name Abraham and Britain, as I've discovered during
Wow.
my research for the Great Migration.
So what brought you into Britain's hidden history then?
Um, I like a lot of people. It was finding the wonderful book, The Holy Kingdom, by Wilson and Blackett and Adrian Gilbert. And it was a complete revelation to me. And I read that book. I've got it here. Shall I show you the state it's in? This copy of mine, it's got ears, it's 30 years old, it's full of my scribblings, and it's got bits stuck at the beginning. This was my early Bible, The Holy Kingdom. I know we're not supposed to be talking about that, but through that, I found Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett's other books. And we're going back, we must be going back the best part of 20 years now, 15, 18 years, somewhere around there. And there was a telephone number at the back of one of his books, Wilson and Blackett's books. Was it The Trojan War? I can't remember. And I rang it, and Alan Wilson answered. I didn't realize
Wow.
it was his home number. And we spoke for about 45 minutes, and I've never forgotten it. And then, like a lot of people, I was trying to, I think I only bought two of their books, and I was missing one. And some years later, I tried to find it, and they were going for ridiculous prices on Amazon, £1,000, £1,500, far out of my league. So I gave that up, that idea up, and then I tried to find them again some years later. So we're going back about 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. And imagine my surprise when I saw they were all republished by Cymroglyphics. And I thought, well, I don't know, that's a new name on me. So I ordered a couple, and they came with the most wonderful handwritten letter from Ross.
Wow.
And I'd explained in my letter that I was interested in this, in my letter of answer to him, I mean, that I was also very interested in Britain's hidden history. And I think this was even before he'd started his YouTube channel. And I was already collating notes about Brutus and the migrations based largely on what I'd found in here. And he said, well, you must come to Wales one day. So we fetched up in Tonteg, and that was 2020, October of 2020, just in time for the lockdown. And so our 6-week stay lasted for 8 months. And I began this wonderful collaboration with Ross, which ended up with me editing the Odyssey book of Wilson and Blackett's, and doing all his proofreading and that sort of thing, and really, really getting on with Brutus and then Albyne, because it was Ross who said, well, why don't you write the book? So that's how the Great Migrations came about.
Wow. So this is going to be a massive addition to the bringing of true British history to light then, your
I
book.
sincerely hope so, yes.
So what's the title of it?
The Great Migrations to Britain.
And when did you write that then?
Well, I started collating the notes for Brutus, as I say, about 10 or more years ago. But it was really Ross who nudged me on to putting it into a book with the other Great Migration, the previous one, the Albyne one from Suma. And so I did, and it's in 2 parts, and I've done it in the true British fashion. We sync back in time. So Brutus comes first, Albyne comes second. And I thought, well, you know, if I get 40,000 words out of this, that'll be surprising. And it's now 101,000 words. And that's absolutely stunning, because I had no idea there was so much to find. I thought I would be, you know, padding it with speculation and whatnot. And indeed, there is speculation, but it's based on a pretty fair and firm foundation.
Excellent. I cut you off then before you said the full title. So it's The Great Migrations to Britain.
To Britain of 1567 BC. And here we stop, because I'm not sure how long it took Brutus to leave Italy, go to Epirus, gather all his Trojan refugees, build a fleet, gather some more Trojan refugees, send all his messengers around the Aegean, and bring them home to Britain. I've allowed him, he was a co-consul with Collatinus for a year between 509 and 508 BC. And I've allowed him, and I really don't know whether this is a sensible length of time, but I've allowed him 2 years to do all that I mentioned in Epirus and around the Aegean and so forth. So I bring him home to Britain in 506 BC. So it's 1567 BC and 506 BC. But that is pure speculation.
Right. So do you think your book then will be the first ever serious study specifically of Brutus and Albyne?
Of Albyne, certainly. There has been one book about Brutus, which was a serious study. And I do have a copy of it. Now, I'm not going to mention the name. Now, that's not because I either fear the competition or I don't wish to, I'm not being, God, what's the word, precious about this. But when I read it, I was so disappointed for the writer, because what he'd done was to try and get at Brutus from the literary evidence, if you can call it that. And you could tell throughout that this man was longing for Brutus to have been a real person, but the sources he chose to base his work on were literary, and therefore he came to the reluctant conclusion that Brutus was a figment, and that is really sad. because you could tell he'd put in an awful lot of work. It's a very good book, but unfortunately it's not based in history, and that makes me sound as mean as anything, which is why I'm not going to give the name or the author, because that simply wouldn't be fair. But
that's a bit
apart
like
from that,
yeah, I was going to say that's a bit like the Arthurian legendary writers, the ones
yes,
who talk about
yes,
Arthur only from the
yes,
literary works in
that's a
them.
very good analogy, that,
Yeah.
yes. But apart from that book, mine is the only serious study of Brutus based in as much history as I can possibly dig up. And boy, have I managed to dig up a lot.
So where did you dig it up from then? What's the base data?
No, when you sent me the script of questions for this, I looked at that question and I thought, blimey, how on earth do I answer that? Where did I get it from? If I say one thing led to another, that's going to sound like the rankest sort of cop-out. But it's true, it's been a detective story. For example, I like going to primary sources wherever I can. I'm not really content with what somebody else says about something. I like to go and consult the primary sources wherever possible. And if you do that, you find not only doors, windows opening up. So you have to go and examine that particular vista, and you make notes and you come back and you think, but here, hold on a moment, this has actually thrown up far more questions than it answers. What about that? That doesn't seem to be particularly logical. Let's go and examine it. And then you find that actually your own theory was right and it fits into place chronologically. I don't think I can answer the question any better than that.
Pinpoint the actual basic data.
It's a detective. I've become an historical detective, actually.
Actually, you've coined a phrase for what you do, haven't you? Because
yes.
based on your passion and love of words that you were talking about
yes.
from childhood, you describe yourself as an archaeographer.
An archaeographer, yes.
And so that study then becomes archaeography.
That's right, yes.
So you've coined them terms. What do you intend them to convey?
Well, archaeography is a form of linguistical archaeology. And it's basically consulting etymologists who only ever seem to go down to they take a word and they go down to the ground level. So can I give an example?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Sort of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that'd
be
great. Yeah.
If you take the words inch, as in a 12th part of a foot, and ounce, they don't, apart from having an N and a C, and they don't look as though they've got anything in common at all. Actually, if you take them both back to their source, they come from a Proto-Indo-European word meaning one or unique. And I'm still on the trail of this one because I've just discovered that inch in Welsh is modfedd, and mod on its word is an old word for a circle. And here we have one unique, you see, and you think, but gracious, but there are 12 inches. How does that fit in with 16 ounces in a pound? And you think, my goodness, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this. And then I discovered, of course, and this was a long time ago, that there are 12 troy ounces, and this is also hugely significant, so significant that it was my first video on YouTube. 12 troy ounces to a troy pound, and that was the measurement that we had in this country long pre-medieval. Don't listen to anybody who says it was medieval merchants. It was nothing of the kind. We had the troy pound in this country until the Normans came. And the Normans, of course, had 16 ounces to the pound, which is what we use now, if we're allowed to, by the EU. And but they actually mean exactly the same thing. Based on what I've discovered today about this modfedd, anybody who speaks Welsh will know the word. mod is, if it's a circle, well, you've got 12 circles making something really rather amazing as a concept. And as I say, I haven't got that one to its full conclusion yet. But wow. This is how I follow lines of research. And it sounds dreadfully airy-fairy, but it isn't. It's all I can say.
But the migrations occurred a very long time ago, maybe 3,400 and 2,500 years ago. Can you show how archaeography helped in the study of Brutus and Albyne?
That's
that one for the book?
Question.
That's one for the book then.
It was less. I won't say less helpful. I used archaeography less to find Brutus because he's slightly closer to us in time, and there are historical records. For Albyne, buried much more deeply, it was really a question of teasing apart teasing lumps of fact out of the British habit of hiding factual things under a cloak of myth. And they do this very, very well. We mentioned Abraham a little while ago. Now, it seems very sensible to me that there cannot, we were talking about the Albyne migration, Abraham's, biblical Abraham's migration, and Hugh Gadarn, who also turns up in the Colbryn. Now, all from the same area, 3 massive migrations. It's simply not credible that an entire country would do this 3 times over within the space of whatever it is. There are 3 names, 3 identities for one migration. This was my conclusion. And I don't pretend to have all the answers to this, certainly not in this context, but I don't even have all the answers in the book, but I do make, I hope, a very good stab at it. Now, the Quran specifically locates Abraham at which I'm sure isn't how you pronounce it. Abraham, as I've said before, the name Abraham turns up all over this country. And Hugh Gadarn's migration, which has also been, is also connected, but specifically Abraham, because I think I better stick to safe waters, literally. In the Brute, where is it? The Brute or Chronicle, I've got it out somewhere. The Brute or Chronicle of England, there is a bit that talks about the migration and how they named the 7, and it's the 7 is the same as we know in Welsh is Irhabren, I think in Welsh, the 7. But in one of these records, it's actually called the River Abraham. Now, as you can imagine, yeah. I nearly fell out of my seat when I discovered that. So that was what got me looking at the name of Abraham. What does this name mean? Now, it's supposed to mean father of nations. Well, that might have been what he was, but it isn't what the name actually means. And this is where archaeography comes into it, because there's a notion, and you'll have to forgive me, it sounds as though I don't know my own material, but my head is spinning with indices, and list of illustrations. Are they on the right side of the page? So I'm not thinking at that very deep level at the moment. So I can't, off the top of my head, remember all the exact definitions, but there's a relationship between Abraham and feathers, which is also related to the Psalms. He shall hide thee under his feathers, Psalm 91. That's not an exact quotation, you'll have to forgive me. And also a relationship with covenant. And covenant in Hebrew is berit or Brit.
Mm.
And this word covenant, the notion, this is how archaeography really comes into its own, because this notion of covenant, meeting, pledge, vow, promise turns up over and over and over again in these stories. And if I find something like that, that I know I'm on the right track. It sounds terribly woolly, I know, but in the book I show, as it were, do you remember at school? Now you've got to show your workings out. And I do try to show as clearly and simply as I possibly can how I take something and arrive at a conclusion for it. And this notion that the seven, Habron, was called Abraham, and it's in one of these records that of course I can't find, was to me an absolute blow away, because it took a completely anomalous lump of Brutus story out of the wrong place and enabled me to disentangle it for the myth that it was and put it back in its proper place 1,000 years before.
Wow.
So that's basically what I've been doing. It's no wonder my head's spinning.
Yeah, we flew down from Belfast, internal flight.
Yes.
And I was amazed when I looked down. I saw this straight superhighway, silver, the middle of Britain.
Yes.
Wales and the borders, in the borders, yes. Isn't it? It seemed to be a straight line, and it looked like a superhighway.
Yeah.
That was the River Severn from above.
Wow.
Yeah. So you mentioned schools there. These migrations just aren't taught in schools, are they?
No.
Is that because academia doesn't embrace them as fact?
Well, I'm going to be very naughty here, and I'm going to answer that with a question. Why is the ancient and immaculate civilization of Sumer not taught about in schools?
Another good point, yeah.
I think this is not the time or place to go into what lies behind all the undoubted manipulation and of our education system. In living memory, for example, Scots state education was the best in the world, no question, not any longer. Now, some vested interests, I think we all know what and who we're talking about, has made it so that the education system does not teach people how to think for themselves, as thank God I was taught how to think for myself. They're taught what to think, and that is the beginnings of tyranny. And I think there I'd better stop, otherwise I haven't got enough money to bail either of us out of prison, which is undoubtedly where we'll fetch up if I carry on like that.
So why is it then that mainstream academia hasn't long found what you
because
found?
Mainstream academia is
not interested.
I think it's more than their life's worth. The vested interests we're talking about hold their jobs and their reputations over their heads. We've seen the damage that can be done to an independent thinking scientist, Immanuel Velikovsky, the damage done to Wilson and Blackett. Oh gosh, there must be several others. There's a Canadian woman, gosh, I can't even remember her discipline. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. She had a double-barreled name and she found something that didn't fit the mainstream narrative. And her reputation was pulverized and she's never been heard of again. And I'm afraid it happens more and more and more.
To actual academics in the university world, is it? Well, Wilson and Blackett weren't in the university world, were they?
They were not, no, but they trod on some very vested interests.
Have you had any support at all from academia or any positive commentary when have you ever reached out, for example?
Well,
what do you think of this?
I do have a website, which is, I haven't got anything on it really, except my mugshot that Ross drew, and a potted biography on academia, which seems to be a very it seems to be a magnet for free thinking academics. Now, this is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I have found several papers by, gosh, let me pull a name out of the ethers. Yuri Mazenkis, for one, who writes about the Hittites, and gosh, I hope I've tacked him onto the right discipline. Just my luck if he's something to do with Anatolia, which of course is the Hittites. Oh dear. Yes, I've found several papers on academia which have been a tremendous help in either supporting my theory or shoving it in the right direction. I haven't put anything up on academia myself, simply because I can't spare the time at the moment and I don't quite know what to put up. But I haven't had either support or the reverse, oppression from academia. But then I'm still under the radar at the moment.
Yeah,
academically speaking.
Well, let's hope that
We'll
doesn't change negatively. Yeah, let's hope it doesn't change negatively when you do publish. So your work takes the historical perspective regarding the migrations back to the time and area of Asia Minor. I think that's right. Prior to migration, before the migration. So that, in other words, is a prequel then to the migrations. Is it dealt with in your book, or do you have another book planned?
It's mentioned where it's necessary to provide a foundation for what I'm talking about in the book, The Great Migrations. I don't expand on it in The Great Migrations for the simple reason that The Great Migrations would be about that big by the time I finished. So yes, I do have a prequel planned. And we have to remember at this distance in time, people were much more connected to what you now know I call the numinous, which is not just God, it's that sense of purpose, the sense of direction, the blueprint that lies behind us all, some in some stronger than in others. That I call the numinous. It's people were far more connected to it 3, 4, 5,000 years ago. And how this came about, how man and the spiritual world, and the world of the urges behind us. I don't mean bodily urges necessarily, although they are important, and they also have their counterpart behind the scenes. I hope I'm making sense. That underpins humanity to a far, far greater degree than it does now. And I examine all this in actually two forthcoming books, one of which is half written. The prequel to The Great Migrations, which was to try and answer your question with some degree of appositeness, is called Finding the Phoenix. And then the other one, which is a slightly more, not religious, religion, my goodness, has a bad name, but God as man, man as God sort of thing. It has a working title of God's Body at the moment. So yes, two more books like that to come, which will explain the background behind us as humans, I hope. Either that or I shall have gone raving mad and I'll be in a bin somewhere. I'm not quite sure.
Well, best of luck with those. I mean, if you put the name God, the word God in the book title, apparently you sell more books. I think there's people who just buy it because the word God is in it.
Oh, good.
God. They get a shock by the sound of it. They might have a bit of a shock.
Well, yes, I hope not.
So this book now, the first one, The Great Migrations, that's due out before Easter this year?
Before Easter, yes. Angie's given me a deadline of the end of February, which I'm trying my damnedest to stick to. Oh, sorry, I swore. My best to stick to. I haven't got a huge amount left to do, but this index is going to take the bulk of the time. So yes, let us say, if Angie watches this, please forgive me. But yes, let's hope it'll be out before Easter.
Easter this year?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yes. Yes.
I want to see the back away then.
I want to see the back of Brutus and Albyne. I want to move on to what lies behind them.
We haven't really had a potted history of Brutus or Albyne. Is there a quick potted history?
Oh, yes, indeed. Brutus turns up in the Welsh genealogies in his exact right place. The English Brute and ancient historians such as Camden Hollinshead, Robert Fabian, Percy Enderby, they take him out of context and stick him back in Albyne's time. As I've sort of vaguely explained, it was quite easy to actually take him out of that, put him back in his proper context, and the whole thing now moves seamlessly from Noah forwards. Brutus, therefore, Brutus descends at the very least from King Lear. This is all in the Welsh genealogies. And he comes from the three daughters, everybody knows of Shakespeare's play, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Cordelia had no children. Goneril's son and Regan's son both fought for the throne. Goneril's son won, as he should, because he was the elder. Lear descends from, Brutus descends from Lear's second daughter, Regan. And I've matched up the generations and everything. Wow. And he is of Etruscan origin at a time when there was very little difference between the Etruscans and the British, because we're talking 150 years only after the Anatolian migration to Italy. Yes. He's actually described by Nennius as Brutus was a consul. So that was a tremendously important clue to hang Brutus on. Also, Enderby, Percy Enderby, who wrote Cambria Triumphans, this wonderful book, which Ross holds up, or used to hold up all the time, Cambria Triumphans. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, I can see it, yeah.
He actually calls Brutus Priscus, thereby hanging Brutus to his Etruscan origins. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus was his grandfather.
Wow.
It hangs together beautifully. It doesn't sound like much when I say it like this, because I'm just plucking names out of the air, but it all hangs together. Yes, so there was civil war going on in Britain at the time, and to cut quite a long story short, a 50,000 word story short, Brutus was asked to come back to this country as a lineal descendant of Lear, to take the throne and quell the civil war, because rumours of his warlike tendencies and his magnificence as a leader. He's actually called Bruce the Warlike in one of the genealogies, the genealogy of Iestyn Gwrgan, I think it is. And so he's asked to come to this country to take the throne and shut up the claimants and quell the civil war, and that's what he does. So that's him. I better not go into too much detail, had I?
There's no need. Just whetting the appetite for your book, basically.
Well, the Albyne thing, I've managed to connect very satisfactorily, far more satisfactorily than I had hoped to do, to a princess of Sumeria called Taram Dungi. And she married the king of a neighboring province called Bashime. And again, I won't give away too much because it's all in the book, right. But she came here. There were, I tried to find out the reason why this massive migration from Sumer happened. And Morgan in the British, here we are, yet another of Guyan Books' offerings. This has been absolutely superb. And he says it's because of floods. And that all ties up very nicely with Santorini and the explosion, the massive explosion, with a tidal wave, a tsunami, which would have gone around the entire world. And as you probably know, was very low lying. at the mouth of the conjoined Euphrates and Tigris Delta. They're like the Marsh Arabs. It's pretty much what the Marsh Arabs would know today, if there are any left of them. So very, very easily flooded. And that seems to be the reason why they left. The whole thing's completely swamped. And they had troubles with the neighbours, the Gutians. And there are other reasons. They needed tin as well. And guess which was the greatest tin producing place in the ancient world? Were. So that's
tin as well. Yeah.
Yes, it's more complex than that. But really, the Great Migrations, I do not pretend that it answers all the questions. What I hoped I've done is lay a firm foundation for other people to go and pick bits that they like and go and do the really detailed and thorough research and examination, because that's not something I'm good at. I can't specialize in that way. I'm not an expert at gosh, anything really, except possibly archaeography. So what I'm hoping is that people will take the Great Migrations and say, right, well, this is my field, this needs examination, I can go and do this and come back, and it all provides.
Well, I think what you're even just talking about it, you're putting migrations of the modern world into perspective. So you've said why these people left. I mean, you could imagine all the Bangladesh population up in and leaving Bangladesh is so low lying. It'd be the same thing, wouldn't it?
Yes,
and the boat people coming over from Dover, they leaving because of war, they leaving their homelands because of drought, and
yes, and there are political reasons behind that as well.
So it's what people do. If it's circumstances where you are aren't right, and you can't change them, then you change your viewpoint where you are, don't you? You up and go.
You do indeed.
So
and there seems to be.
So I was just going to say, we're all mongrels then on this island. We're not.
Well, we are and we aren't actually.
So what does the DNA show then? Is that how you're going to answer this?
Oh gosh. The DNA for the match between the Anatolian people and the Etruscans is pretty good. There are plenty of papers which I do not pretend to understand, but I can vaguely work out that there is a match between the people who left Anatolia, the Hebrews who left Anatolia and fetched up in Etruscan Italy. And there's not only a match between them, there's a match between the cattle that came with them, which is
it's even better evidence, isn't it? Yeah.
Indeed it is. I would love to be clever enough at DNA to find a match between the people who came with Brutus and fetched up in Britain 150 years later after the Anatolian migration. I'm not. This is one of the areas where I'd absolutely love a microbiologist. No, that's journalist, isn't it? Somebody anyway who's qualified in this field, to go and have a look at this DNA and see exactly how it all fits in. So the answer to that is a qualified yes. DNA does come into the Great Migrations, but only where I've been able to understand the paper and. Where I can apply it. I'm not nearly clever enough to go and go off into a separate field of study. DNA is not my thing, but not.
Yeah, an American friend of mine thought all the Welsh and Scots were all white, very pale-skinned and red-headed. So I corrected her. Actually, the archetypal Welsh, which is British, is black-haired, short, and olive skin, darker skin.
It's true, and that seems to be a Cymric Anatolian thing. However, there's a lot of reference to the tall, red-headed, tartan-wearing people whose bodies fetch up inconveniently all over the place, such as Urumqi and Egypt. Mummies all over 6.
With red hair, that's true.
Red hair, exactly. So it seems to be two distinct but interlocking body types. And And this seems to match with the twin pillar concept. Again, I go into that, the twin pillar concept, because it's not just a thing of Freemasons. It's the strength and the establishment, if you like, it's the strength of the body with the establishment of the mind. So you can't just have, without the mind, the strength just becomes brute force. It needs the refinement, it needs the mind. Equally, mind without body has no power over anything. So the two go together.
So that ties in with your numinous that you were talking about.
Yes, absolutely, which is all all informed and influenced by what lies behind.
So did these tall red-headed people then inhabit these islands before the Great Migrations?
Oh, I would say they did.
You think they did you?
Well, right. If you take Morgan's word for it,
yeah,
and why shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Innocent until proven guilty, right until proved wrong. That's how we do things in this country, or used to. He says that Noah, whose name was not Noah, left these islands and went out to out on the ark, fetched up in Armenia, as we know, and from Armenia, and they were giants. So maybe that answers your previous question.
Right,
yes, Ron, damn, I've forgotten his name. Ron Wyatt is very, very good at this. And he's another one who's been completely blacklisted by mainstream academia because he goes off into all sorts of interesting areas that you and I would find fascinating and well worth a study, but because it doesn't fit the, the narrative, he's been completely washed out of it. But he found the Ark. Oh, I don't know if you saw my two Noah videos. I go into it in detail, but Morgan, to cut another long story short, Morgan says that Noah left from this country. So the two migrations coming back 1,000 years and 2,000 years after that was simply homecomings.
So that could explain why they sound as if they were bloodless migrations then, and common language as well, maybe.
Yes. The language, oh boy, no, wait a moment. I have to show you another book, if that's all right. And I have to thank Sean Perry for putting me onto this because it revolutionized my understanding of the Albyne section. And it's this. Lawrence Waddell, the British editor. And he shows how we are connected back. I know I could just remember what I was going to say, how we're connected back to the Noah migration, well, sort of forced migration that was, wasn't it? No, there is a script, and again, I won't give it away too much, but I did blurt it out on the live chat a week or so ago, so I feel I can say it again. His dates are approximately 3,500 BC, so 2,000 years before Albyne. That's the hero of this story, and of this epic, which is another British epic alongside the Iliad. Good stuff, this. He is said to have come from the Danube Valley, and there is a script found in the Danube Valley called the Vinci script, V-I-N-C with a wee thingy on it, Vinci script. And there's a tiny little illustration of what Vinci script looks like. And I thought, that looks like Coelbren. So I got out my Coelbren alphabet from Wilson and Blackett, and I translated the word on the engraving, and that's from 5,500 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
Unbelievable. It's amazing, not unbelievable, but amazing.
I'm doing this stuff, and I find it hard to believe.
Yeah, I know.
So basically, what Wilson and Blackett say about the alphabet trail is the Goths from the Danube Valley, bringing their script, who are actually us from the from the Noah thingy. That's the technical term, you understand. And they are known to have gone to Sumer, and they bring this script back with them to Britain, where we call it Colbren. So it's thousands of years old.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, it's not unbelievable. I keep using that
No,
expression
I agree with you.
because it takes my mind.
Yeah, I mean, mine
Amazing,
too.
amazing is the correct
Absolutely.
word.
But somebody who's somebody like, oh, if I mention poor John Griffith, and his son Adam, they've done such fantastic work on the Colbren. It needs people with their sort of open-minded outlook and their expertise in Colbren to take this tiny little snippet that I found and do some real work on it. That's not for me. I can't do that. But somebody like John Griffith certainly could, if he's not too busy doing other things. And John, if you watch this, I apologise if I've dropped you in it.
I find it amazing that there's so many people with that intellect to be able to do this. Because Wilson and Blackett, like you, I read Holy Kingdom and other books. And when you start reading how they deciphered coil
Yes.
stones, I mean, it's just
Yes.
mind-blowing. And then the hieroglyphs.
Oh,
So presumably then there's further evidence for Albyne, Brutus, Noah, and it's there to be found. Have you found any?
I have to say, archaeography is an armchair discipline. We've had a very busy year. Last year was very big. We moved house and all sorts of things happened. Haven't yet been able to do half the field work that I would like to do. The answer to that has to be, at the moment, no. It's not because it's not there.
Just
But
you haven't
again,
found
this
it
is
yet.
something, it's just, I simply haven't been able to find it because I've been laying the groundwork. I want other people who do the field work, maybe an archaeologist, geologist. We need a geologist to talk to go and find evidence of the comet. This country has been so badly neglected in terms of its true history. I've just finished writing a section, where was Albyne buried? And the answer to that is, I haven't a clue.
What about
I think
Brutus? Do you know where Brutus was buried?
probably on the ancient records say, the British records say he was buried under the White Tower, the Bryn Gwyn in London, and of course the Tower of London is is it? Oh gosh, when were Belinus and Brennus? 400 BC. The Tower of London is at least 1,000 years older than we have been led to believe. I don't mean in its present construction, although there might be some really ancient foundations there. But the Bryn Gwyn was a holy mound. E.O. Gordon goes into this in her book, Prehistoric London. So it was holy to the Loegrians for thousands of years before, or at least 1,000 years before, William the Norman came here and built his tower on it. That's where Brutus is said to be buried.
Well, and you've got no idea where Albyne could have been buried then?
Whatever.
No, at all.
Whatever. It's odds on she will have been buried somewhere in Norfolk, where part of the fleet arrived.
Right.
Well, for now, I say that, I'm going to retract that speedily. The part of her fleet went into the Severn, part of it went into the Thames, part of it went into the Humber.
Right.
And she landed all round the south.
Yeah. What about Brutus's return? Where did they land?
Torbay.
Torbay. Oh,
Yes.
right.
I know at this point, I just want to put my head in my hands and go and take up gardening or something.
Yeah,
But
so they,
all the records point to it.
yeah. So where did they spread then? From the south up, from all sides in?
Yeah, as is the way. You carry on, as is the way of migrants. You keep your objective in mind. But when you're on an island, of course, your barriers are
the coastlines. Yeah.
So you carry on and you go and explore, and you find your way round until you fall off a cliff. basically. So I think it will definitely have been from the south and from the southeast and southwest upwards and outwards. Yes, there are places all over Scotland with Sumerian connections. Gosh, I mean, I won't go into
won't go
all
into
that.
that one. I think that's another migration, isn't it?
I think it probably it's certainly another story. Yes.
Yeah, but
Yes.
you previously mentioned you write extensively in novels as well. Now,
Yes.
I think it's you can put your head in all these technical books and then your head spins. And I love a novel to just bit of light reading, bit of relief, especially on a hot
Yes.
summer's day up in
Liking
the
things.
garden.
Yes.
So, have you read any? Sorry, have you written any novels?
I have. I've got one was published. Actually, the box of books arrived when we were at Tonteg. And
Oh,
I'm so nervous of seeing my own work in print for the first time that I circled round the box for about 3 days before I could bring myself to open it and have a look. But yes, this is my first one, and so far my only one out. And I'm sure people will have seen the cover. This Ross very kindly publicised it for me. It's available through Matador Publications, and it does have the Iliad as its basis. I use forgotten, neglected, and hidden British history as the basis for all my novels. I've got several more which could come out tomorrow, but
no plans to publish them right away then.
I'd love to if I could find the right publisher. I thought that might be me, but I'm not sure that I can manage to write and publish as well. So I've done a bit of a backtrack on that. But if I found a sympathetic publisher who would allow me to keep my own standards of English and punctuation, and not expect me to use alternate when I mean alternative and that sort of thing.
Americanisms and all that.
Yeah, grim.
Yeah.
Then I'd love to sign a contract.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Marchell. I really appreciate the time you've given us today, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
In your work,
pleasure.
yeah, and with academia, and with book sales as well.
Well, thank you so much for your interest.
So on the end of this recording, we'll show where we can buy the books, the first one that's already in print, and also then the Great Migrations. That's going to be an important one.
Yeah, I hope so.
You've mentioned you've already recorded interviews on your own YouTube channel. What's that called?
Oh, my own YouTube channel is just my own. It's just Marchell Abrahams, but I did quite a few with Ross, which are on the.
The ones with Ross will all be left on Britain's Hidden History YouTube channel.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
So we look forward to seeing more from you in the future then.
Well, I've got another one coming up actually tomorrow with another YouTuber. And isn't it nice, by the way, to see Ross's subscribers going up all the time? It's fantastic. He'd be so pleased. Yes, I've got another interview coming up tomorrow, and can I give you this as a nice little thing to end with, because it's a real fillip to me. Amazing. I've been invited to collaborate on a children's book by the illustrator David William Press, he's called. And he's seen my work, and he would like me to contribute to giving him the historical background. Now, his book, and I promised I would get this right, The Bulldog Bikers, What Made Britain Great. And I should be clever enough to show you the cover, which he so thoughtfully sent me. Sorry, David, if you're watching this, I'm not very good at this sort of thing. But yes, I've been invited to collaborate with him. So this is all points west. It's fantastic. I'm so lucky.
Excellent. We're lucky to have you in the movement with us. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure. Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
Welcome.